A lot of people think about, I'm going to use AI because I can break in and use artificial intelligence tools to break passwords, do all this. Yes, but you know what it also allows me to do? It allows me to understand your employees. It allows me to understand what they like, dislike. So we talk about insider threat. So that technology now allows me as an adversary to learn more about your people.
Today's guest is Dana Barnes, a Naval Academy graduate, Marine Artillery officer, and president of TRSS, a Thomson Reuters company focused on intelligence-driven risk management. Dana's career took him from IBM's program management culture to Microsoft during its cybersecurity reckoning, through Palo Alto networks and Dataminr, and into a role where his team now uses data science, human analysts, and AI to trace risk across supply chains, financial networks, and adversary organizations.
Welcome to the Risk Apogee, where we cut through the noise to get to the truth about risk, cyber, physical, human. Every organization faces threats. What separates the ones that survive from the ones that don't is the decisions their leaders make under pressure. Each episode, we go inside the arena with the operators and strategists, shaping how organizations defend, adapt, and lead. This is the Risk Apogee.
Dana Barnes, welcome to the Risk Apogee Podcast.
Oh, thank you, man.
It's always good to see you.
It is good to see you.
Yeah, we both come from, I think, deeply experienced enterprise risk backgrounds, starting in the same place, both academically and at least starting our careers in service. You went on what I would perceive to be, and certainly my audience will perceive to be, a relatively unique pathway into the enterprise space, but still touching on the various aspects of both national security and risk. What are some things that you think you've learned over the course of your career in terms of looking at risk as a broad-based potential threat to enterprise, but at the same time, if you proactively lean into it, it can be a rewarding sense of sort of creating a foundational safety and security within an enterprise?
Well, I mean, man, I'm so glad you asked that question, because you think about my career. We graduate the academy, go into the Marine Corps, go from the Marine Corps. My first job out of the Marine Corps was at IBM. And when I was at IBM, it was all about program management, process, structure, and that's how they were managing risk. It was through having these really structured things. The whole company was program management based. Go from there. Later on in my career at Microsoft, whole different view of risk. Because if you remember when Microsoft was getting in trouble from a cyber perspective, this is the Bill Gates days, Bill literally shut the whole company down for a couple of days. We are just going to do, cybersecurity, and we're going to get better at that. So I got to see that, play out. Go, fast forward to Palo Alto networks. I mean, we're talking cybersecurity. We're talking managing the threat, real time. Initially, it was firewalls, and you get into SASE, you get into all these different capabilities. That was really cool. Move forward from there to a Dataminr, which is a completely different type of risk. Now we're talking about force protection. We're talking about disaster information. I mean, they were one of the first people tracking the COVID virus. Right? So I got to see risk from so many different perspectives. But what I realized was it's all interconnected. Right? It's all interconnected. And I would say that's the biggest thing I learned throughout, my journey, is that risk isn't just looking at one specific discipline.
Most companies, I think, look at it in silos. Talk to us about the types of conversations that you have now with senior stakeholders, and maybe how difficult a proposition it is, or easy, in terms of getting them to recognize that we're talking about a landscape of risk across the spectrum, rather than just those siloed approaches that they might be organized in.
I think it's a really good question, MK, because they do look at it different. Leaders have different perspectives. I would say many of them look at risk purely in that cyberspace initially. If you just were to ask a senior leader, hey, what are you doing from a risk management perspective? Many of them, their first inclination is going to be a jump straight to cybersecurity and tech. As we talk to senior leaders, in our business, it gets bigger than that, is what I'm starting to see. What I love to get into is their understanding. We talk supply chain, not from a technical perspective, not from what is someone putting into my firewall, or what are they adding to the batteries? Batteries are a big thing. Think about DoD. They're really focused on, hey, we got to have all these batteries. Where is the supply chain coming from? And what we're starting to see, and I start to talk a lot with these senior leaders, is do you understand the full scope of your risk? So it's not an endpoint solution. It's not something that you can just sort of checkbox your way because the government, if you're in a regulated industry, for example, they gave you a checklist and let's say, hey, this is what you have to do. Or if CISA has designated you as critical infrastructure, so make sure you do these things. It's not just that. You really have to understand the entire ecosystem around you. Suppliers, the suppliers, all the way down.
Right.
Who's on the board of those companies? Not just are they a company that's foreign owned, but who's on the board? What are the connections that person has? So it becomes this a full sort of almost an intelligence-like component. TRSS, we kind of believe in this sort of intelligence-grade risk management, which means we're not just looking at the endpoint, we're looking at leveraging all sorts of data. And I think if you're a senior leader, my conversations revolve around what data do you have? Because data is one of the most critical, precious commodities that an organization have. How are you leveraging it to understand it? And then how are you applying that to your understanding of your risk? If I were to go and talk to GDIT, the CEO of GDIT, probably would get, I'm looking at everything, right? Big company, knows that they're going to be attacked, knows that they're a vector. You go to a mid-tier firm that doesn't do government work or is in a completely different space, they may not even realize that what they have is valuable to the adversary.
Yeah.
And that they're a target. And so we have a lot of conversations about, do you know what your real value is?
I'm glad you're going down this lane because we operate at Apogee targeting small to medium-sized businesses. I feel as though those organizations, and in varying degrees, there's such a wide swath of the types of enterprise and companies that fall within that small to medium-sized business space, that there's both in some cases a lack of understanding of the risk landscape, but even if they have a good understanding, maybe there's a lack of maturity in terms of how they're developing their risk apparatus and how they're thinking about it. And that spectrum's there's some heavy swings one way or another. As you go into organizations, any observations about how organizations are thinking collectively about risk? Are they still domain approached, or do you see any enterprises like taking this collective approach, building like a risk team as opposed to just a cyber team and physical security team, bringing all this together?
We see it across all spaces, although I would say it's still heavily more about just that cyber component, insider threat component. Is someone going to take our data? But we're starting to see now, and I'm going to use the financial services industry as an example, we're starting to see them realize things like reputational risk, right? So, hey, if you're a bank, who are all of your account holders? What are they connected to? Are you giving them loans? Understanding that is critically important. We had a law firm actually reach out to us and say, hey, we'd like you to vet these two organizations because we're going to be doing business with them. So imagine if you're
due diligence.
Yeah. Imagine if you're a law firm and you start to work with a company and then later find out that company is being backed by, Chinese government, North Korean government, and a big portion of your business is actually with the U.S. government.
There's a problem.
There's a problem. Yeah. And we did some work, and lo and behold, we were able to dig really deep using intelligence, using lots of different data sources to say, hey, well, actually, this company, you do have a risk. That doesn't mean you don't do business. It means you have a risk.
You're aware of it.
Aware of the
risk.
And
control as you try to mitigate it.
Yeah. I think a lot of companies today, what we see, especially that small, medium-sized business perspective, think that it's very difficult to do that or don't understand it, or they make a financial decision based upon a return.
Right.
Without understanding everything. So they get stuck. And it is siloed, like you said before, too. The chief security officer comes in. Well, what is that chief security officer's background? Is that person more of a traditional old school physical security person? Are they a more of a CISO type person? Do you have a blend? What's their specialty? Because what we also see is that people go to what they're comfortable with.
Right. Is it fair to say that the impact of technology is the thing that's driving the need to show this interconnectedness, or do you think it's more than that?
Well, I mean, listen, as technology evolves, that just creates more of a, you're sort of the plane, if you think about it, everything around me, that risk area grows, right? Because technology is advancing. I would say that, I liken it to this. I always tell people, think about the evolution of security, just security. Well, when we were all running around in bear skins and everything else, we just put a rock in front of the cave, and that was security until somebody figured out, well, I'll just move the rock. Then, we figured out, well, I'll have doors. And then the adversary says, well, I'll pick the lock. Everything that you do to secure and protect, it's an evolution. Then the adversary tries to figure out ways to break that.
It's not a stale landscape. It's constantly shifting and changing.
And that piece of it, when you think about tech today, let's use AI, and I know we'll probably talk about AI a little bit later in the conversation, but what is it allowing me to do? A lot of people think about, I'm going to use AI because I can break in and use artificial intelligence tools to, break passwords, do all this. Yes, but you know what it also allows me to do? It allows me to understand your employees. It allows me to understand what they like, dislike. So we talk about insider threat. So that technology now allows me as an adversary to learn more about your people.
Let's pause on the insider threat piece, because my experience in the FBI and my experience in enterprise seems to reiterate that is the least invested area for enterprise buyers and stakeholders. Why do you think that is? And again, we've shown that in terms of the devastating impact, it's one of the most, it has widespread implications. Why is it the least invested?
You are my personal or my business answer to this question?
Give me both.
All right, I'll give you my personal answer first. I think we trust too much in our people. And I don't mean in terms of them not making mistakes. I think that we have this belief, it's a human element. Yeah. We hired these folks, they perform well, and we feel like, okay, they're not going to do it. And then add on to that, and we have endpoint capability. Right. So I can see what you're doing with your phone. I can see what you're doing with your laptop, but that doesn't mean that the threat is not there. Yeah. And so we don't invest as much. Also, the other aspect of it is human beings change. So the insider threat, as you know, and I know you've had tons of training in this space, I may not be a threat today.
But things change.
Something can happen in your family life. Something can happen in the world. Something can happen wherever, and it changes how people view things. And I think that's a challenge. So that's my personal view. Yeah. My professional perspective is checkboxes. Yeah. Well, I did the background check. I have endpoint tools on the devices that they will use. I have policies and procedures on when you come into the building, when you don't come into the building, what you can access, what you can't access. And therefore, if I've checked these boxes, I'm secure. That's the business view. And that it's easier to do that than to take a more holistic view and potentially you may have to spend a little bit more to have more of an intelligence-based approach.
Right.
And I do think there's an element of that, because where do most people who are in this space have usually grown up? They usually grown up in the government.
National security space.
And that's a checkbox space. Yeah. I mean, why do we love airline pilots and the ones is, they just, before we take off, they can check. We all feel safe until the drone that's being flown by David over here that we didn't think about, did we check? And so we're constantly evolving. And there's a gap between the checklist that we build and the adversary figuring out that checklist and doing something else.
Well, I think you made a really salient point about the fact that people change over time. Circumstances change. And I think that we're only evaluating, in most instances, the entry point. So you're capturing that employee information at the beginning of their journey with you. But what are you using to have those checkpoints in the middle and subsequent times within the journey? And I think most organizations, I'd probably give them a big failure on that in that regard.
It is a very difficult thing to do, because you have to weigh the balance between privacy, right? Like, you don't want to be just like, we're going to investigate every employee. Every 9 months we're going to do it, or every 3 months we're going to do this.
I mean, like you, I grew up in the national security space. I remember, in the FBI, every 5 years, basically your background was reinvestigated, and it created a baseline starting point. They collect your financials. They collect, information about what's happened in the intervening year. Sometimes, if you're doing national security investigations, you had to get back on the box and get re-polygraphed for national security concerns, and that's obviously extreme. You can't replicate that unless you work for a DoD contractor. Right. You can't replicate that in most enterprise space. But somewhere in the middle, I think there are best practices, maybe observational things that, checking in with your employees. I think oftentimes in the enterprise space, we wait for the employee to show that they are in distress or have malintent towards the organization. And oftentimes I think we treat neglect with very little concern, because a lot of insider threat things are negligent. They're just mistakes that folks make. I know that you guys have at TRSS, and maybe we can talk a little bit more about your role at TRSS and what you guys do in the enterprise space. I know that you guys rely heavily on a technological approach to identifying those signals, which I think is a great way to approach a portion of it. Yeah. How do you think enterprises can meet sort of that middle ground?
I think it's multifaceted. So, and it's not just insider threat. I think it's having a full picture. So when we work with our customers, normally what happens is they give us a problem. And it's usually not about them, other than it's more about their supply chain. Right. It could be about their reputational risk aspect. So external things, right? But what we end up learning as we kind of go through everything, they can use to get a sense of their organization, how their organization is functioning, where there may be some gaps internally, but how are they connected externally as well? The world is moving really, really fast. Partnering is if you're going to do business today, commercial business, government business, you're partnering. Even our federal organizations partner with other federal entities, right, both in the U.S. and internationally. Yeah. So execution is about partnering too. So understanding those connection points, who's talking to who. I live in a unique world because we're actually a foreign-owned conflict of interest company, so a POCI company. Yeah. So here's an interesting one for you. Anytime that I have a meeting with our parent company, which is they're Canadian, so Thomson Reuters is our parent company, it has to be reported. Every time. It's like, hey, your meeting with we had this week.
Even though Naval Academy graduate, Marine officer,
this guy is trustworthy.
Up and down, Captain America.
I love that one. Captain America is actually my icon for my phone. We have to report that. Yeah. The employees have to report that. They're not allowed to come into our facility. Let's report it. We vet every partner. When we talk to you, MK, we've vetted Apogee. We're like, are they good? What? Are these guys okay? So, and it seems like, oh, you guys, that's a little bit overkill. But when you really think about it, that's important because you have the employee connections. You can learn a lot. Well, why are you talking to that company, right? The other company, is there something with that other company? We need to make sure that solid, good to go. Those are the types of things that we do. There is no magic solution, I don't believe. Yeah. So there's no perfect, if you do this and do this, then you're never going to have an insider threat issue or anything else, or you're never going to have any form of risk. That's if you live in that world, then it's over for you already. Right. But you can do things to be proactive so that you can potentially get signals, right? And if you can get signals, that allows you to protect yourself.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably fair to say then that the investment itself, if the ROI on that is you get additional signals from which to make prudent decisions, that's what signal is all about, rather than noise, right? Yeah. You're getting the right variables and bringing that all together and then making a decision. Yeah. Right?
And you don't have to do it yourself. This is what I would say. A lot of companies may think, well, I can do this myself. I think that companies should do what they're really good at. Right. And that they should work with other companies who are really good at other things to help them with the things that they're not really good at. If you
Dana, go ahead, steal that.
Okay, you can steal it. You can steal it. I love it. But if you come to TRSS and you said, look, we really need a company that can bake cakes, we don't do that. And Could I go to my team? I'm pretty sure we have some folks who are well into baking in my company, but that's not our thing.
That's not your lane. Yeah.
Right? So if your thing is, hey, we're not the company that does intelligence gathering and analysis for risk and fraud. That's not what we do. However, we have a need to understand risk and fraud as it relates to our company. Go get someone who knows that space and work with them to make sure that they're supporting. I think it's key. Go get a risk assessment. Have someone come in and say, hey, here's your risk. This is something I see that leaders miss all the time.
Yeah.
Just understand.
There's a resistance to bringing in outside eyes.
Yeah.
And there's lots of different reasons, both psychological and otherwise, that folks are resistant to outside opinions and observations.
Yeah.
I've come to believe that it's almost a requirement, because even if you guys run a well-run ship, that outside perspective is just going to pick up on things that you cannot.
100%. Because you fall into this sort of, you understand everything. So when you look at yourself, you understand why you did this, why you did that. You understand everything. And you may overlook holes. You just and it's not intentional.
Yeah,
It's
a natural thing.
When someone from the outside starts asking questions, now you have to explain to someone who doesn't understand why you did X, Y, or Z. And as you're explaining it, they can dissect it from a completely different lens. And they may say, oh, wow, have you thought about? And you go, no, we didn't. So it doesn't hurt. But having those assessments, if you don't know because you haven't assessed what your potential risks are from time to time, I mean, it's one of the things I love about, the way our federal government in particular works. They do assessments.
Yeah.
At cybersecurity, we're having an assessment. Just like I'm sending the team down, we're going to check. Aviation, we're going to do assessments. We're not just going to trust that you're doing anything right. We're going to do an assessment. Here's your grade.
Right.
Here are the areas that we're concerned about. Companies should be doing that when it comes to this space. We're talking about risk management. If you're a CEO and you have a board that you report to, and you don't at least have an understanding of your sort of your risk, what it looks like, and what have you done, what have you not done.
When I like to think of it in ways similar, obviously, to what you just explained, but I also think that for those internally, the stakeholders, you can use it as these observations as a point to potentially pivot or realign on the direction that you're expected to be headed in, because you can lose track of that internally.
Yeah, I think 100% you could do that. And if you understand that, oftentimes companies make investments in technology.
Yeah.
They'll tell folks, we're doing this because it's going to do this for you and this for you and this for you, and that's how we're bringing it in. That's why it's important for you to learn. Okay? Sometimes chief security officer says we need to make these changes. And there's the why. Sometimes there's a gap. The employees, the company, they don't know the why. Mm-hmm. So right now, my folks, they're big on the why. Believe me, it's been 8 months in this role, and one thing I've learned is you better give the team the why we're doing something. Because when they understand the why, you get buy-in. Risk management is also about making sure that your people buy in, to your point about, hey, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And it's an opportunity to improve. And in many cases, for companies, if you do it, you find other benefits beyond the risk management. You will find operational enhancements.
Yeah, there's dividends to be gleaned from the entire process. I want to make sure we don't gloss over something that you just picked up on. I think oftentimes first of all, the term audit is used way too often, even if it is an audit. I'm not sure I would call it that. I might call it a review. I think oftentimes people think that there's some punitive action associated with the outcomes of these reviews and assessments. And I remember, during my time at Google, we had something called a blameless postmortem, which I think was, first of all, a very novel and unique idea. And they actually adhere to it. They actually, after a security incident of any kind, they bring the stakeholders into a room and they review it without blame. The idea here is, and it's a part of the culture, so no one goes into it assuming, oh, I'm going to get axed or, my job's in jeopardy. You go into it like, okay, here's what happened. here was our reaction to it. Here's what we had done in the pre-planning, and here's how it unfolded for us. Because there's value in that.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure everyone, certainly not everyone, but I'm not even sure a lot of organizations think in that manner, that there's value to be gleaned from mistakes.
I can tell you, I would agree with you. I don't think everyone understands it and they don't value it. But what I've seen, because we talked early on about my moving around different companies, and one of the things I have seen is that when you do the hot wash, all right, we did it. A lot of times we'll do the hot wash on the victory. We did a great.
You recognize that's a purely military term, right? Because when we say hot wash to do it,
when you do the review of the thing that you just completed, and it may have been a great success, and usually we review the great successes. Why did we win?
Yeah.
Hot wash. We don't do as often the review of the why did we lose or why did this event happen?
Right.
And that you learn more from that. You know, I always tell people it's okay to make mistakes because that's how we get better.
Right.
If you keep winning, doing the same thing, that's great, winning. Are you actually advancing if you keep reviewing what you did and it's the same thing over and over? And what are you going to do when the scenario, the environment changes? If you review how you lost and why you lost, oftentimes you're beginning to see the environment changing and you can see things and learn and you get better. Risk management is 100% about review and what happened and get better. And so I think organizations do need to embrace that more. I don't think they embrace it enough. And I think it's the human element that you just described, which I love the fact that Google, I might steal that one with this sort of like nobody's
blameless postmortem. Yeah,
because
I've taken it into my enterprise as well.
Most people
I'm trying to explain it.
Yeah, most people are afraid of that.
On a personal note, as I think about your career trajectory, this is kind of you're uniquely qualified for the role that you now occupy. Is this kind of the pinnacle of career progression for you, or?
Well, I have to survive this particular. I need to survive this year, and then go. I take it year by year. For me, this is the most amazing job I've had. I'm going to tell you why.
It brings together.
Yeah, it brings together everything that I've done. But TRSS is a really unique company because it touches. So the biggest thing that we do is, to me, when I talk about the why, because every company needs to know what its why is. Like, why are you in business? What is it that makes you special? What makes us special is that we take kids and we make sure that they get home, and that the folks who are doing into child exploitations, we can catch them. We can get them. The law enforcement can get there and prevent that and return kids home. People who've been human trafficked back home. What's interesting is that, as you know, money rules the world. Financial fraud drives a lot of that activity. Right. What also happens in that activity, so people think about human trafficking, you think about child exploitation, that's usually being driven by cartels. It's usually being driven by extremist organizations. It's being driven by organized crime and in these elements where they're not just they're using that human trafficking and that child exploitation to gain money.
And then they move, some other aspect.
And then they move weapons, they move drugs, they move all kinds of things. What's so cool about my company is that I get to see the outcome of us saving lives, but I also know that work that we've done helps companies, the bigger companies and the smaller companies, it helps them manage their reputational risk. It helps them manage, in some cases, their supply chain risk, which could end up saving lives as well. All of those things. And we do it. I love it because when I told you I started at IBM. IBM was very much consulting people. I mean, they had tech, had amazing tech, but it was a lot of just, we got the people, put them on the ground, and we'll do all this great work.
Crunch numbers, crunch data.
Then go to Microsoft. It's like, we got the products, we got all that tech stuff that you need. The beauty of this job is we have technologies and products, but we have amazing analysts and we have amazing data scientists, and we're merging those three components so that you have this real intelligent platform capability. We get really deep, and that's the thing that I love. So when you ask, is this like the pinnacle for my career? probably this is my Super Bowl. I'm going to call it what it is. Like, I'm never going to be a Fortune 500 CEO.
Well, you don't know that for sure.
Well, the folks are watching. I'm here. I'm available. But I'm never gonna be in that seat. I don't even know if I want to be in that seat. But this, to me, is like the Super Bowl, because what we're doing every day impacts folks, and I'm having so much fun doing it. But the tech that we're building, the work that we're doing with AI is incredible. And it's really interesting, because even our parent company, Thomson Reuters, they love us. You know why? Because we're doing all that stuff I just talked about, and they can say, look at, like, this is what we're doing. We're doing all this good social good work.
The why.
Yeah.
So again, we've talked a couple of times about your career trajectory, relatively unique and fascinating. What advice do you have for folks who are interested in risk across the spectrum? Getting into physical security, cyber, potentially pursuing technical, training, that kind of thing. Because the job landscape's a little different than when you and I entered it.
It's very different. I would say you have to figure out what it is, and this would apply to anyone real, what it is that you enjoy. It starts with that. And that's probably the hardest thing for most, particularly when you're young. When you're 20 years old, you're like, okay. Yeah, I watch my sons, both of them. One's 26 and one is 21, and they're both like trying to figure, like, what do I want to be? What do I want to do? And I really try to center them on what it is that you actually enjoy. Ultimately, you have to try to find. You should fight for this really hard. What is it you enjoy? I loved the Marine Corps. When I was in the Marine Corps, man, I loved it. And then they were like, well, you can't do artillery anymore. We're going to send you your next duty. Say you're going to go to the TBS. I love that. That was awesome, teaching lieutenants, teaching. And then they're like, by the way, now you got to go do the desk thing. I don't want to do that. Right? And so I left there, and I got into sales, and I didn't like sales commercially. I was like, then I got to do government. I love that.
Right.
And so I started to focus on taking roles in government that supported government. Didn't matter what it was. I'm just going to do this. That gave me this sort of really interesting picture, because I didn't pigeonhole myself. I did lots of different things. And I think the more that young folks do lots of different things that align to what they enjoy, they're going to get this really amazing perspective. And from a risk management perspective, that means do some physical security.
Yeah.
Learn a little bit about cybersecurity. Learn a little bit about marketing, which is in public affairs, which is all tied to risk. And then you'll be well-rounded, and you're going to have lots of opportunities. And you can then kind of pick, like, I'm going to go here, I'm going to go there. But I think it's about being exploratory, as long as you kind of have a general idea of what you really enjoy.
You're sitting in front of a Fortune 500 board of directors. One or two salient points that you would want them to walk away with after you've given them a brief or talked to them.
It's about expertise. And you don't have all of the expertise across all of the areas. And it's also about people. Everyone's talking AI today. AI. It's a tool. You still need a human component to help you. That's why TRS says we have the three-legged stool. We have data scientists, analysts, and the tools, the AI-based tools. You need all three. It doesn't have to cost a fortune, but none of that works if you don't understand why your company is important. Because if you understand why your company is important and what it does is important, the why, then you're going to understand what your risk is and what people are trying to take away. Right. And I would say, if you don't have that assessment, you don't have that roadmap, you better get it quick.
One final question. Army v. Navy, 2026. Who's going to win?
Are you asking me who's going to win?
Yeah, I got to ask. I know for our West Point brethren out there.
I don't get it. We're always going to win Navy. I mean, Navy's always going to win it. Even when we don't win it, we win it because we look better when we go on the field.
Exactly.
So, no, we're going to win that. They're going to win that. We didn't win a lot when I was there, but I think we only won one time when I was there. That was horrible.
I think we lead the series right now.
Yeah,
so we're still in good shape.
Oh, yeah. No, we're good. So, no, I'm excited about that. And you see the guys who are playing pro ball. So you got Heidenreich in particular, who's in Pittsburgh.
Drafted. That's a pretty really phenomenal moment for the program.
And the young man who was on the D line, a phenomenal athlete. I can't remember his name now. He was amazing. So he got drafted. Just a good,
No.
So I like what they're doing. My old roommate, Mike Riggins, he's done some consulting for the team, gone back and forth. So he played. He was a good athlete. I was a pretty good athlete too, but I didn't get on the field. But I was on the team.
We're going to dig into that. Dana Barnes, President TRSS, thank you for joining us on the Risk Apogee.
Thank you for having me, and I love it. Please invite me back.
We'll do. All right, folks, that's it for this episode of the Risk Apogee. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the landscape.
Thanks for being here on the Risk Apogee. Every episode, we dig into what it actually takes to lead through risk. And that's the same work we do every day at Apogee Global RMS. Cybersecurity, physical security, organizational resilience, talent strategy. One integrated approach built around your people, not just your platforms. Are you ready to move from reactive to resilient? Visit apogeeglobalrms.io and sign up for a risk-free consultation with our team of advisors.